Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Radio Unplugged, a live series by WRTH where we bring together voices from around the globe and talk about radio. I'm Sakshi, I'm the marketing manager of WRTH, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. Whether you're joining us from across the globe or just discovering the shortwave world, you're in for a real treat today. Today's session is DXing through time, the shortwave listener's journey, and we're joined by a true veteran of the craft, Rob Wagner. Rob has been tuning into shortwave since the 1960s, and he's the writer behind the Mount Evelyn DX report, a blog filled with insights, stories, and technical resources. He's also active on YouTube, helping guide the next generation of DXers with his wealth of experience. Leading the discussion today, we also have Gunter Lawrence, CEO of WRTH and a longtime radio professional himself. With decades of experience across international broadcasting and media, Gunter brings a deep appreciation for how the world of radio has evolved and where it's going. Together, Gunter and Rob will explore how DXing has changed over time and share personal stories and technical tips, and of course, answer your questions live, which you're invited to share on the Q&A box you see on your screens. So let's get started. Gunter, I'll hand over the discussion to you now.
Thank you, Sakshi, and welcome everyone. Welcome, Rob. Good evening. And
Thank
I
you.
see from the other participants today, this is a really global meeting. We have other guys from VK5 and VE something, so it's really global. So that's the world of shortwave as it stands. Rob, I see you have been DXing a couple of years more than I've been doing. How did you start? What hooked you up to radio and to shortwave?
Oh, well, it was just really by accident, about 14 years old. And we had this beautiful Stromberg Carlson radio, like a radiogram. So it had a turntable on one side, had the radio with the big dial on the other side, and it had a space in the middle for records. And this beautiful piece of furniture, as well as a beautiful piece of electronic equipment, was given to my parents for their wedding as a wedding present. And I said to my father one day, "What's this SW down the bottom here?" And he said, "Oh, that's shortwave. You can listen to overseas radio stations with that." And with that, he sort of got up and left. Well, 57 years later, I'm still at it, so it's been a long journey, and but it's been a really edifying, gratifying journey as well. There's a bit of a story about the Stromberg Carlson radiogram. Actually, I decided one day to go around the back of it and do a bit of tinkering with my screwdriver. And after a while, I blew up the speaker in the thing, and my parents were not happy with me at all about that, and they let me know about it, and they replaced the speaker. They got a new speaker, but they always said to me that the new speaker didn't sound anywhere near as good as the old speaker. So I ended up in the bedroom, and most of my early DXing was done from the bedroom. so that was that, and since that time, well, of course, around about that time after that, I started listening to lots of different stations, and I wrote a reception report. My first reception report was to HCJB in Quito, Ecuador, and I wrote that report on October the 9th, 1968, and they were broadcasting on 9745 kilohertz, which was an amazing signal. Came from Ecuador there, high up in the Andes with their big transmitter. It was almost a full darkness path between Quito early in the morning and then evening about 7 p.m. Here in Melbourne. And they just had beautiful armchair copy. And of course, there was a program there called the DX Party Line. You probably remember that. It was on for many years, and it was very popular. It was probably the most popular program on HCJB, never mind all the religious stuff. That was the one that, because they gave out DX tips and talked about radio, and they talked about aerials and antennas, and they talked about HCJB's antennas, and it was all really, really exciting stuff. So that day I wrote out a reception report. I put all the things in that I thought I needed to put in, and then I sent it all off, sent the letter off airmail, and I waited by the letterbox for days went by, and then weeks went by, and then months went by, and I'm starting to think, God, what have I done wrong? You know, I thought I'd got it all right. You know, what happened? And then all of a sudden, 5 or 6 months later, a QSL card comes. And here it is. This is the QSL from 57 years ago. Wow. With all the details on the back and lots of information about their new arrival of giant transmitters. And of course, the giant transmitters were 100 kilowatts in those days. And so I've still got the card, and I've still kept it. And I'm sort of very fond of that card. But the reason why it took so long was because they said, well, you need 3 international reply coupons to get an airmail response. Well, I had no idea what an international reply coupon was. I'd never heard of them. I didn't know where you get them. I didn't know what you do with them. And so, but I learnt pretty quickly. So that's how it sort of started. And then I then had, I guess I wrote hundreds and hundreds of reception reports to different parts of the world, Africa and Europe and Central and South America. I wrote reception reports in English, of course, because that's my native language, but I also wrote in Spanish for the South American countries. I wrote in Portuguese for Brazil and for some of the Portuguese enclaves like Angola and so on in Africa. I wrote in French as well, reception reports there, because so much of Africa in those days was sorry, I got distracted there with a message came up. So much of Africa was speaking French in those days, so you had to sort of write in French. So quite a lot of those QSL cards are up on a thing called the QSL archives in my on my blog. So in those days I DXed everything: shortwave, medium wave, utility, ham. If it transmitted, I tended to DX it. So it's not like that these days, but that's how we started out.
Great, wonderful story that you're telling us, Rob, and I think many of us will remember specific details like HCJB, which we learned where this country Ecuador was actually located, because most of us hadn't heard about it, and it had this internationally very famous radio station. And then it had a DX program, as you mentioned, which was very important for us. I remember I listened very much to Radio Sweden, and the program was Sweden Calling DXers, and they had a very nice DX program, and you could even get mentioned if you sent in some tips. So that was very nice. And I also like the story of this old tube receiver where you damaged the speaker by tinkering around. I think I damaged them completely when I started playing with them. Yeah, very, very nice thing. And also the times you had to wait. I mean, nowadays we are expecting everything happening immediately, but at that time, mail took quite a couple of weeks or months to come from Ecuador to Australia, and there's not a daily postal ship going there. So that's
no, there is not.
As you started a really long time ago, and if you compare it to today, what's the biggest difference in when you started and nowadays? What's the biggest difference in your view in the shortwave listening experience?
Well, there's probably 3 areas particularly. There's obviously a lot less stations on the shortwave bands, both the international stations and also the low powered domestic broadcasters in Africa and South America, in Asia, and even in the Pacific Islands. I mean, in those days, the Pacific Islands used to all have shortwave transmitters and so on. A lot of those have, or most of those have just sort of disappeared over the last 10 or 15 years. So that's one change. The other thing, though, is that with the bands being less crowded now, because there's less stations on the air, it's certainly a lot easier to hear broadcasters without adjacent channel interference. Like in those old days, those radio stations were crammed wall to wall on every 5 kilohertz spacing, and it's a lot different these days. So it's actually easier in some ways to pick up stations. They tend to not get that same sort of interference that they used to have. And then the other thing too, I think obviously, is the shortwave receiver technology and design. I mean, the changes there have been huge over the past 5 decades. We talk about those big old heavy receivers, the old boat anchor type receivers, and then the receivers got smaller and smaller and smaller down to tiny portables. And of course, they were all valves or tubes, as the Americans say in those days. And that got down to transistors and IC circuits and, the whole solid state thing. And that helped reduce the size of the boxes that the shortwave receivers used to be in. And then, of course, these days now we've got the software-defined radios, which is really quite a different sort of thing altogether, and it's really pushed the boundaries again. So there's been some huge technological changes that have really made shortwave listening a lot easier, I guess.
Mm. I think the old piece of furniture, as you call it, may still be around at your home. I hope so, because it's all certainly nice to see. What's your current setup for listening? I guess you're using SDRs.
Well, there's a lot of radios in my shack at the moment, Gunther. Probably too many, my wife would say. The one I go to is the Yaesu FT-DX 3000, the amateur radio, the amateur band transceiver. It's got a beautiful receiver in it that really is a low noise receiver, and that's the one I tend to go to for most of my serious listening if I need to do that. I've got a Kenwood TS2000 transceiver, which I've had since the early 2000s. And that's one I sometimes take out if I want to do a bit of ham radio work out in the countryside. I will take that one out. I've got a Yaesu FRG 100 receiver, which was quite popular in the day, and actually was, I think, quite an underrated receiver. It's a really, really good rig, that one. Some years ago, I picked up a Kenwood R5000, which was a really unique receiver because it had a lot of innovations when that receiver first came out. And I picked up one. It was in pretty bad condition. And so I spent a bit of time over several years just trying to restore that receiver and got that going. I have a Panasonic DR48, which our American and Japanese friends would know as the RF4800, which was quite a big receiver, plenty of room to work on and inside it. You could get around in there without too much problem. I've got 2 FRG7 receivers, the old frog receivers. I used to, either Frog 7s, I used to call them. One's in really nice condition and works really well, and the other one I use for parts. And there's a bit of a story to that, but I won't go into that now. I've got the Texan PL680, which features a lot in a lot of my YouTube videos when I'm out in the countryside. And Texan make good radios, and I've never had any problem with that one. But the newest addition is the and I've only had this like a couple of months now, is the SDR Play RSP Duo, and I'm using it with the SDR Connect software because I'm running an Apple MacBook Pro laptop, and I'm having real fun with that, learning that. Still got a bit to do with it, but I really like that visual connection that you can make with those. And of course, the other thing that you've got to do when you're talking about radios, receivers, is you've got to add the antennas onto it as well. So they go a lot better with antennas, I find, Gunther. I don't know about you, but I think they go really well with antennas. So I've got a horizontal loop antenna, which is 80 meters long. So it's about 20 meters on each side, approximately. It's in a sort of a squarish shape. Depending on where the trees are growing is where that loop is, and that's a fabulous receiving antenna as well as a transmitting antenna because it works on so many bands. I've got a vertical delta loop, which is cut for 10 megahertz, so that works well on the 30-meter amateur band, plus also 31 meters, 41 meters, and 25 meters in the broadcast bands. That's fed at the top with a 4-to-1 balun. I've got a 5/8 wave center-fed vertical for 21 to 29 megahertz. So it's a very broad-banded vertical for up on those higher frequencies while we're enjoying the peaks of the solar cycle. And up until a few months ago, for a long time, I had a 14 megahertz double bazooka antenna, which some people will know as a coax dipole. And that worked really well on 20 meters, of course, and 19 meters in the broadcast band. But that antenna fell down a few months ago, and my wife and my doctor don't want me climbing on roofs and ladders, so I've been prohibited from doing that. So that's tucked away in the garage at the moment until I can find a way of getting that one back up again. So that's the working conditions here, as they say.
Okay, great setup. A lot of very well-known and reputed receivers, and it's nice to see that you're also going portable. And yes, we all know that the antenna is the best HF amplifier, as they say. Now, with such huge antennas and such fine receivers, how is your experience regarding the so-called man-made noise, the RF interference? And is this the reason why you go out to the countryside with the portable stuff to avoid local noise?
Well, it is. I mean, it is a big problem for shortwave listening in cities, in urban areas and suburban areas. We know that it's got worse and worse over the years. I mean, I've got tape recordings of stations that I used to listen to in the 1970s, and you just don't hear any of that RF man-made electrical interference that you hear now. You hear, usual atmospheric noise and static, and you might hear the occasional fluorescent light or the power pole out the front, but that was all you would hear in those days. But these days, with things like these little switch mode power supplies are a real problem. They're attached to all sorts of electronic gadgets that we have in our house. It's one of those situations where you plug them in, and you've got to think of these things like they're poorly made. Many of them are poorly made. They don't have they're poorly designed. They don't have very, very good filtering on them, and they radiate noise. And they're like little transmitters. I call these things little transmitters, and the leads that come out of them, they're like little antennas. And those are the sorts of things that are a real problem. Of course, you've got power supplies and computers are very much a part of our lives these days. Any electronic gear, there's a potential for it to be radiating noise. Here in Australia, we have got a big take-up of solar panels. In fact, more than a third of households throughout Australia run have some sort of solar panel system up on their roofs, and so the inverters of those solar panels, some of the poorly made ones, radiate noise all over the place, and it covers so much of the shortwave spectrum. So the sorts of things that we've got to look at is lowering the noise floor, keeping the noise floor as low as possible. And by that, I mean basically the level of noise in your receiver, which is picked up when you're tuning to an empty frequency where there's no station on the frequency. So if you're in your house and you've got an S7 noise level, that's the noise floor there, which means that the station has got to be stronger than a signal strength of 7 to poke up through that noise, and that is a real problem. So if you can get the noise down, you're going to be able to hear that station better, but you'll also hear weaker stations underneath that noise as well. So if you're suffering from noise interference, which most of us are in some form or another, I guess there are three things that you can do here. One of them is to find out where the noise is coming from. So you get your portable radio. You don't have to extend the antenna. You get that portable radio and you turn it on to an empty frequency on the shortwave bands that you mostly use, and you go around the house and you just put that radio near various pieces of electronic equipment, the power supplies and all those sorts of things. Just have a listen. If the noise is increasing there, and it's increasing dramatically when you're putting it near some of this gear, then you know you've got an RF noisemaker in your house. And so then you have to and the other thing too is to then shut off that electronic device and see if the noise goes away on the receiver. So, those sorts of things really help. You've got to do a bit of detective work to find out in your house where that noise is coming from, and particularly in the room where you're listening to your radio. You've got to kill that noise in there as much as you can. Once you've discovered where the noise is coming from, you've got a few options. You can either turn it off when you want to listen to the radio, or you can change out those little power supplies with better power supplies that have better filtering, or you can use ferrite, which
somebody mentioned in a chat message that ferrites can do magic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you've got the toroid type, and you've got the clip-on type. These ones, which you just feed the wires through and wind them around a couple of times. You wind them around the toroids as well, and they make a huge difference. So I've got one here from which is attached to one of my antennas normally. So it's a big toroid, and so the coax is wound around there numerous times. They're held in place by some plastic secure tags. Here's one which is a big clip-on, which we use really very effectively for power leads and Ethernet cables. Those sorts of things really help. So I have those all over my radio room on just about every piece of equipment that's on. So I've invested fairly heavily in those. And that does make a bit of a difference. But you've got to remember that there are different types of ferrite. So it's getting a bit complicated, so I won't delve into it much here, but a mix 31 is really useful between the HF range of 3 to 30 megahertz. The ferrite is actually made of an iron oxide and various other minerals which are varied in their degrees of composition to come up with different mixes of ferrite. So you can control quite a lot of noise by using those. And the thing to remember here with all of this is that you don't have really any control over the amount of noise that's coming out of your neighbour's property, but you do have control or potentially control over what's coming out of your own home, or if you live in an apartment, something like that. And then I guess the third thing too, once you've tried to defeat and bring down that noise floor in your home, is to then do one of the things that I get a great lot of joy out of, and that is heading out into the countryside, into the forests, into the woods, into the great Aussie bush, as we call it, or down by the coastal regions, by the sea, just getting away from civilization and built up areas, and take a radio and a roll of wire. And I started doing this in the early 2000s, and it's, as I say, one of the joys of DXing, as far as I'm concerned. I'll go to a picnic table, or I'll take my own picnic table, or I'll just DX from the car. And the thing is, on those situations, and you'll see that's in some of my YouTube videos, you go out into some of these locations and the noise floor is virtually non-existent. It's just there. And the weakest signals will peek through. And some of those weakest signals aren't even moving the signal strength meter, but they're still, you can still hear them. You can still hear the carriers. So it's all about getting the noise floor down, which is what which is the big challenge here, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the challenge for newcomers. They may be frustrated because you turn on the radio and at your home and you find just a lot of noise and not a single station coming in, or only very strong stations. I really can only support what you said. Going out in the countryside, move away from electric noise, because the distance is really one of the solutions, and then you will hear the fascination of listening to weak signals. Rob, it's a pleasure listening to you, because you have so much experience, so much things to tell and to talk about. The time is flying quickly. Thank you so much, and I would leave the floor for questions. Back to Sakshi.
Thank you so much. It has been really interesting. And we got a lot of comments on our chat box from across the globe, which is fantastic. And we have some questions from Facebook. So following up on your point, Gunther, about younger generation getting frustrated about some points, there's a question. Rob, do you see younger generations getting involved in DXing? If so, how can the community support and encourage them?
It's hard. It's really quite difficult. I've done some work in schools, or some years ago, trying to take the radios in and talk about that, and with my ham radio license, I've got that opportunity to be able to do that as well. But it captures the imagination for about 5 minutes and it evaporates, because there's so many other things going on in the world, and it really is a challenge. I don't have any easy answers to that. I wish I did.
We have another question that we can move on to. It's come from Jace Gilbert live on our session today. If you have an amplified antenna, example MLA 30 plus, is there still anything to gain experimenting with different antennas?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for me, antennas is one of the areas that I really enjoy. There's effectively two things from a technical point of view, aside from listening to the radio. The two things that I enjoy is experimenting with antennas and talking about propagation, and how those signals arrive here. But with antennas, there are so many antenna designs to explore. Now, if you're going out into the countryside, you don't need to take a fancy antenna out there. In fact, I just go out usually with a reel of wire, antenna wire. You only need about 4 or 5 meters of antenna wire. You could attach it to your portable, to the this compromise antenna here, or you can use the many of them have got antenna sockets there, and just roll that out. I usually go out with a reel of and I'll roll out about anywhere between 20 and 50 meters of wire, and I just string it through the trees, and it's just amazing what you can hear with all of those. So, but then there are antennas at home that you can build, and in fact, I'm going to write a little bit of a series for the blog. I've been thinking about this for a while, just talking about the different sorts of antennas that shortwave listeners can use. Some are better than others at picking up signals. Some are better than others at picking up noise. And that's a bit of a problem. So we want the ones that pick up the signals better, not the noise. So yeah, no, I look, I'm a big fan of external antennas. I've had very little experience with loop antennas, and I know quite a lot of people are using the loops because if they're in restricted locations and they haven't got a big backyard like I have, and so if they're living in an apartment and things like that, then those loop antennas, the small loop antennas with the amplifiers in them and so on, absolutely fantastic. They do a good job, but nothing beats a nice long antenna cut to the right frequency.
Thank you so much for answering that. We have another question from Hari. Rob, did you pick up the signal of All India Radio Akashvani from India and any QSL you got?
Oh, lots, yeah. Or when they were All India Radio, not Akashvani, but I have lots of QSLs from years gone by. I don't write reception reports these days. I will write to the stations because I'd like them to know that I'm listening to them, but I'm not really interested these days in QSL cards. I've got enough of those. Yeah, no, the main overseas service of All India Radio was very easily received down here. In the recent years, they've actually tightened up their services so that they're looking more at their neighbourhood countries than they are beyond into so much into Australia and Europe and those sorts of things. And of course the other thing that All India Radio used to run with all the regional stations on shortwave, they were fabulous. And we used to hear them signing off at around 17:30, 17:45 UTC years ago, which was 3:30, 3:45 in the morning here, and on the 60-meter band particularly, there were many of those stations, and they were great fun to listen to as well.
Oh, lovely. I've grown up listening to Akashvani a lot, so that's really interesting to know.
Of course you have.
Yeah, there's another point. Can we create a DXing user group to share experience? So Jay, I'd answer your question. We have a group on Facebook. It's called WRTH. I will share a link on the chat box for you to join. And we have a lot of DXers in that group as well. One last question, Rob, that we have again from our Facebook audience. We have actually a couple of questions. Let me choose the one that I think is the most interesting. What trends or changes in shortwave broadcasting do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, well, I think DRM will continue to be there. It's been very slow to get started, and down here in Australia, where we're miles away from most of the rest of the world, DRM doesn't go really well here. So it's very difficult to receive many signals that are DRM signals down here. And the problem with that is, it's a digital service, so therefore the signal is either there or it's not. But I think when the difference between that and the typical AM shortwave signal is that it, even if the signal falls down, you can still hear what's going on with the AM signal, and you can sort of deduce what's happening. But when the DRM signal falls away, it's gone. So it's very hard for us here. DRM, I think, works really well in Europe and in Asia. because there's so much population around there to benefit from it. So there may be some development more with that. I suspect that we might lose one or two more international shortwave broadcasters. I don't know which ones. I'm just guessing. But it was a surprise to lose the Voice of America. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I heard that, and they've closed down all the transmitters. But what's happened though is that it's affected other stations that were using VOA transmitters. So Radio Filipinas, what was the other ones there? The various broadcasters: Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Radio Free Asia, they were using VOA transmitters. They've all lost those services as well because VOA's closed down. So that's had a real big impact and a real shake-up. We may find that much smaller shortwave stations are springing up. I know in Europe there's a lot. Station 292 in Germany does a great job, Gunter. We hear that in Melbourne, and we can hear it on a winter afternoon via the long path. It's amazing how a low-powered station like that could come across. Down here in Australia, we lost Radio Australia in 2017, and it won't be coming back. But there is a license available for people, organisations who want to use shortwave legally, and they're a low-powered licence up to 5 kilowatts. And there's a number of stations down here in Australia that have sprung up as a result of that. So you may find there's more of those that come on board. Certainly down here in Australia, we could expect that might be the case. But in other parts of the world, I think, the lower power shortwave stations may start to spring up. So we might hear some exciting signals coming on. You've got to keep your optimism up, and you've got to keep your ears open, because something might happen.
Well said. Excellent look into the future, and keep on listening, keep on tuning. That's what it's all about. It was like that in the past, and it will be like that in the future. And remember that shortwave is really the only part of the spectrum you can listen globally. And it's nice to hear that this German radio station is arriving so nicely in Australia. Great. Thank you, Rob.
We have a lot more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So we will have to end this session today. But thank you so much, Rob, for joining us and sharing not just your expertise, but also your passion. It's clear that shortwave isn't just a hobby, it's a lifelong journey. And for everyone that's watching, whether you're reading the WRTH ebook, or you're using the web app, or flipping through the printed edition of the physical book, we're proud to be a part of your listening experience. You can explore our range of products at WRTH.info. I've also shared all the important links on the chat box for you to navigate. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll also share the highlights in our newsletter. We send it out every week on Thursday, and also our community corner, which is our blog on the website. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, Gunter. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, stay tuned, and keep listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob. Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone, for being with us.